When I ask UX people who practice user research what is their biggest challenge, I usually hear how hard it is to engage stakeholders with research. What are your thoughts on this topic?
I think that in general, when people feel like they don't have stakeholder buy-in for doing research, it's from a lack of understanding about what research can offer. So I think it's really up to the researcher to educate people on the value of research and how it's done and what to expect and the timing and all of that. So I think one of the ways that researchers can sometimes get into trouble is if people perceive them as an obstacle to getting stuff shipped, if they perceive that research is going to take a long time, and also if they think that you're just always going to find problems with everything. So I know that it's our job as researchers to come up with things that need to be improved, but often if they're just framed as like, oh, these things are all wrong and you don't come to the table with concrete recommendations and ways to move forward, it can be a real downer for teams. So I think that sometimes that can lose some goodwill between researchers and teams.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend to in-house UX researchers who are always trying to identify opportunities for impactful research if they want to better identify such opportunities?
I think in general it's a good idea to get in front of the product as much as possible. So try to figure out what the product roadmap is going to be and what the direction is, and then see what research you can do to inform where the company will be in the future. Because if you're always trying to catch up to what's launching and just doing usability testing on things that are going out the door next week, you're not going to be able to make the most difference. So inform new features and products, even identify opportunities for features and products that haven't been talked about or thought of within the company. Mm-hmm. And also work very closely with other areas of the company. Qualitative research can't be done in a vacuum. It needs to be closely integrated with analytics. You should be working with product managers and people who are defining the strategy of the company to figure out what the overall user picture is. Work with support to hear what people are writing in about as problems. And then I think every researcher at a company should have a broad general understanding of the user base. So if you haven't already, a very impactful project that you could do is to just do an overall audit of who is using your product, what are their overall needs and wants, and what is their profile. Because that will come in handy with any future research project that you do.
Mm-hmm. UX researchers sometimes experience a tension between conducting research they were asked to do by their stakeholders, for example, product managers, versus research they were not asked to do but think they should do. What are your thoughts on balancing this tension?
I think that when product managers ask me to do a research project, the question that I always have for them is, what questions is this actually going to address? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you trying to figure out when you want me to do this? Because they never are coming to you and really just wanting, a usability study on their feature. What they're really wanting is they're really wanting to understand how users are going to perceive this post-launch, if there's any user problems in the flow that need to be addressed, that kind of thing. So I think if you can get it away from a discussion of I want this study done, and back into a discussion on, I have these questions about the user experience, what is the best method to get at this? How does this fit in with other research that you're already doing, that kind of thing, then I think it'll be a lot more productive.
Can you tell me a story about a difficult stakeholder who did not understand or respect UX research? And you don't have to mention any names if you don't want to.
I have a whole bunch of these stories because I think everyone who does research is used to working with engineers and product people who've worked at small companies before. And often at small companies, there's not a lot of research input into things that are being worked on. So often when you work with people who are coming from those kinds of environments, they just perceive you as an obstacle. And I think it can be a real uphill battle to get them forward with doing research and understanding the value of it. So I think one case that I remember having is I had a product manager who I worked with who just didn't make the time to talk to me about my findings, didn't make the time to do research with me or talk to me about the goals of the research. So every research I did with that team was pretty much self-directed. And it was just really a fight every time I wanted to talk to them about findings to get, even 10 minutes on someone's calendar to talk about it. And that was really frustrating because I felt like it was difficult to even prove the value of the work I was doing if I couldn't find the time to sit down with them and explain what I've learned.
So what did you do eventually?
I think in that case, it was just a matter of reallocating my energies elsewhere. Mm-hmm. There's always a lot of stuff at every company mm-hmm. that can be researched, so I think there's a lot of things that you can do creatively to make video clips and to work with different people on the team if you're finding that one person on a team is very difficult to work with. I think that in general there's a lot of different angles that you can take. If you can find an engineer or support person who's really bought into the research, you can maybe use them as an in for the rest of the team and maybe even get them to schedule meetings for you. But I think beyond a point, it's a matter of prioritization, and if you're really fighting an uphill battle in one area, you can always just focus your energies elsewhere.
All right. Many UX practitioners are always looking for creative deliverables that engage their stakeholders with research findings. What are some deliverables you found to be working well for you?
There's two main things that I found to be really useful in different contexts. So the context where it's a broad company meeting and we just sort of want to give an overview on where we are with the research and sort of what are some general sentiments that are coming out. I found video clips to be very helpful with that. Mm-hmm. Because video clips really carry a lot of emotion. They really induce a lot of empathy in people. And they're short, and they can be shown at meetings where maybe not everyone is involved with the project that's being researched. So I found that that's really good for just generating awareness about research in general. But I found that when working with specific teams, I take a more traditional report structure generally, and I found that that's really useful because when I can be very specific about the issue and the recommendation after working with designers to come up with a recommendation that will probably work, product managers can literally just copy and paste it into Jira or another project management piece of software, mm-hmm. and then it's minimal work on their end to get it actually in progress and assign resources to it. So I found that that's really useful if we can just get very concrete about what it is that we're recommending, how should we get there, how should it behave, and then from that point on, it's up to the team to just go ahead and do it.
Okay. How can UX practitioners tell if their stakeholders are bought into research?
I think I found that most times when I do research with teams, it's so obvious because they come back to me after the research session and they say, like, wow, I had no idea that these are the things that people are saying about this. Like, it was very eye-opening. And then you can really tell that people are just really grateful to have this insight into how people use things. I feel the vast majority of stakeholders are actually very open to research and really want to know how people are perceiving the stuff that they're spending all their time working on. So I think that a good way to tell is if they come back the next time when there's future research that needs to be done. If they come to you and say, hey, like, we want to do round 2 of this, we've made some changes, we want to see if they work, then you know that they're on board with what you're doing. I think that another good way to make sure that you have stakeholder buy-in is to really pay attention to your analytics. If you make a recommendation, stay on top of it and actually make sure that it's making the difference that you said it was going to make. Because if the analytics are backing you up, and if over time you're finding that your recommendations are actually helping the product move in the right direction, make sure that people know about that. And I think anyone who's working on a product and cares about its success will acknowledge that that is really worthwhile.
Okay. Now, I want to finish with a couple of questions that we got from people over Twitter when I told them I'm going to interview a Twitter UX researcher. So, what tactics did you take to get buy-in at Twitter?
I think when I first started at Twitter, I worked with a team of researchers, so we all worked together in terms of getting buy-in and also in terms of conducting the research. This isn't just me by myself. But I think when I started at Twitter, it was a matter of coming up with a schedule so that people knew what to expect from research, and doing routine testing. So when I started at Twitter, we were working on the first major redesign that was called hashtag New Twitter when we launched it. And we got into a routine of doing weekly usability testing on that to look at very early stage prototypes and evaluate just the overall navigation and expectations for different things we were thinking about. And I think that having that schedule was very key in terms of getting people to understand when we were going to have findings ready, what kinds of things they could expect in terms of the number of sessions that we would run, what kinds of questions we would ask. And it allowed us to have scheduled times with the teams every week when we could talk about the changes that had happened. So we would talk about this week versus last week and talk about what we wanted to ask differently in the session based on those changes. And that project's over, but I think a lot of the rhythm and routine that we started with that project, we still use today. So in terms of working with product teams ahead of time to identify what the questions are that we need to address, and then making sure that they're very, very clear on what they can expect from us, when we're going to get them deliverables, when the research will be, whether they'll be able to watch the sessions live, that kind of thing.
Do top Twitter execs ever observe research sessions?
So when we've done usability studies, we have generated a GoToMeeting viewing link so that anyone who has the link can watch from their computer at their desk.
Yep.
But we also stream the GoToMeeting stream into the design studio space.
Okay.
And then it just plays on a television, and anyone who's in the room can watch. And usually people aren't paying full attention to it. They're sitting and working on other stuff. But then sometimes something will catch their ear, and they'll pay attention, and it'll generate a discussion among the designers about the best approach to a certain problem, for example. And I know that execs have stopped into that room during the sessions and, maybe not stayed for the full session, but just sort of listened and overheard not only the conversation with the participant, but also the conversation among the designers in the room about the study, and gotten some basic background that way.
And do they have input into research topics or goals?
Yeah, I don't see the research topics and goals as very different from the product or design topics and goals, because to me they're all serving the same function, which is just to serve the product. So I think that when we worked on this latest redesign, we definitely had a lot of discussions with all of the stakeholders, including executives, about some of the issues that we were seeing in research. And we actually made a bunch of changes before launch based on those findings. So even though we were on a very short time frame, it was prioritized because some of the navigational issues were going to cause serious problems for us down the road, and we knew that we were starting this framework that just was not going to be scalable. When we saw this come up in research sessions, we actually had a lot of brainstorms about how to address it. What we came up with was very different, but also, I think, much better for users. And that was through everyone working together on that.
All right, perfect. This is all I had for you. Is there anything else you wish to say to UX researchers out there?
No, just keep good work.
All right. Thank you very much, Karina.
All right, thank you.